I told him I was going to therapy. Every Tuesday at 6, I said it was helping. I said I was working on myself. I even let him drop me off a few times, just far enough from the building. But there was no therapist. There was just him. The man I swore I'd never see again. The one I told my husband was just a mistake. But I wasn't fixing anything. I was breaking everything. And I kept saying, it's just therapy. But the worst part? I actually started to believe it. If someone lies about getting help, are they too far gone to come back? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one. I told my husband I was going to therapy. It wasn't a lie the first time. I did book a session. I even sat through it, nodding, pretending to care. I talked about childhood wounds, about the distance that had started to grow between us since he switched jobs, since he began coming home with nothing left to give. He sat beside me during that first session, his hand resting gently on my knee, as if his presence was enough to fix us. But he couldn't see the real problem. And the therapist? She didn't even ask the right questions, so I never went back. But I didn't cancel the appointments. I just stopped showing up. Instead, I started seeing someone else. Not a therapist, not a professional. Just a man I shouldn't have been talking to in the first place. His name was Eli. We'd known each other years ago. He was a friend of a friend. I'd kissed him once when I was 21 and stupid, back when I thought attraction meant something. Nothing came of it. We moved on. Grew up, got married to other people, but I ran into him by accident one afternoon at a coffee shop near the clinic. I was supposed to be going to therapy. I was 5 minutes from checking in. Instead, I walked past the office and into that cafe. I told myself it would just be a coffee. One conversation. A familiar face, nothing more. We talked for 2 hours. He made me feel noticed. Like my stories were interesting. Like I was still a woman, not just someone's wife or mother. Not a tired face wiping down countertops and waiting for her husband to remember she existed. I didn't tell Eli I was married. Not at first. I didn't take off my ring. But I also didn't mention his name. And when I left that day, I told my husband the session went really well. That was the first lie. The second came when I saved Eli's number in my phone, under the name Dr. Hartman. I told myself it was just to keep things private, that it didn't really mean anything. He was just someone to talk to. But I already knew I was crossing lines. The texts turned into calls. The calls turned into late afternoon meetups. I started dressing nicer on therapy days. I wore lipstick again. Perfume. My husband would smile as I walked out the door and say, "I'm proud of you for doing this." And I would kiss him on the cheek and say, "I'm trying." But I wasn't. I was escaping. And the worst part? No one suspected a thing. I was always back by dinner. I kept the laundry folded. I still packed his lunch. I was perfect. So no one asked what I was doing during those 90-minute sessions. Eli lived in a studio apartment downtown. It was always too warm, too quiet. We didn't talk about our spouses. He didn't ask questions. He just wanted me to be there. Sometimes I'd sit on his couch and cry. I told myself it was therapeutic. I told myself I needed this, that if I could just feel alive again, just for an hour or two, I could go back to being a good wife. But every time I left, I felt worse. I'd drive home in silence, park 2 blocks away, check my hair, wipe off the lipstick, breathe 3 times, then walk in and say, "It went well." My husband would look at me with those tired, gentle eyes and say, "I'm glad, babe. You seem lighter." He meant it as a compliment. He didn't know he was talking to a stranger. It didn't feel like cheating at first. That's what I kept telling myself. We weren't sleeping together. I wasn't sending him photos or talking about sex or fantasizing about running off with him. It wasn't an affair. It was an outlet. A space. A crack of light in a house that had started to feel too dark, too quiet, too small. But the truth is, I had already left my husband in all the ways that mattered. I started scheduling my therapy around Eli's days off. He was freelance, worked odd jobs, picked up gigs when he could. Some weeks he was available more than others. And on the weeks he wasn't, I found myself irritable at home, snapping over small things, pacing the kitchen like I'd lost something and didn't know what. When Eli and I met, we didn't talk about what this was. That made it easier. We avoided the labels, the guilt, the looming threat of consequences. Instead, we talked about books, about music, about the people we used to be before mortgages and tax returns and grocery lists became the centerpiece of life. He'd brush a strand of hair from my face and smile like I was 20 again. And in that moment, I could believe I wasn't a woman lying to her husband. I could pretend I was someone else entirely. It escalated slowly. One day I stayed longer than usual. The apartment was warm, the air too still, and I sat too close on the couch. His hand brushed mine. I didn't pull away. I didn't lean in either, but the moment stretched into something else. Something loaded and dangerous, until my phone buzzed and I jolted like I'd been burned. It was my husband, just checking in. "How's it going?" he wrote. "I hope it's helping. Love you." I showed the message to Eli, laughing nervously. He just looked at me and said, "You should probably go." I did, but not because I felt guilty, because I was terrified by how little guilt I actually felt. I stood in the shower that night longer than usual. My husband brushed his teeth beside me, humming something, tapping his toothbrush against the sink in rhythm. We looked like a married couple. We looked like everything was fine. But something inside me had already started to rot. I deleted the message chain with Eli that night. Not because I wanted to stop, but because I knew it was getting harder to justify. The next morning, I messaged him again. I told him I missed talking, that it didn't feel the same without him. He sent me a smiley face and said, "You know where I am." And I did. The first time we kissed was 2 weeks later. It was soft, quiet, nothing like the hungry kisses of college hookups or the forced routines of marital intimacy. It wasn't desperate. It was easy, familiar, like slipping into warm water. I pulled back and stared at him, my hand still on his chest, his fingers grazing my wrist. "I shouldn't have done that," I whispered. He didn't say anything, just looked at me. "You're not going to tell me to leave? Do you want to leave?" I didn't answer. I stayed another hour. It became routine. Every Tuesday and Friday, I went to therapy. That's what I told my husband, and that's what I wrote in the calendar app. I blocked it out so convincingly that even I started to believe I had earned that space. Deserved it. He believed it was helping. I stopped arguing as much. I smiled more. I slept better. All of that was true. But none of it had anything to do with therapy. It was Eli. It was the fact that for 90 minutes, twice a week, I was a different version of myself. A version that wasn't being relied on, or managed, or slowly ignored. I wasn't being asked to carry anyone else's weight. I was just wanted, not needed, not expected. Wanted. Eli didn't ask about my husband. He never even mentioned him. He didn't ask about my guilt or if I had any. He just existed in a world that didn't include shame, and being near him made me feel like I didn't have to bring mine along. It was freedom. Illicit, short-lived, and completely addictive. I told myself it was still just emotional. That yes, we'd kissed, and yes, we'd touched, but we hadn't gone all the way. That line was still uncrossed, and I leaned hard on that difference like it meant something. Like it made what I was doing any less devastating. But one afternoon, the lie fell apart in my own mouth. My husband offered to pick me up from therapy. He was already in the area, he said. Traffic was light, and he had time between appointments. I panicked. Said no, I'd Uber. Said I needed some quiet time afterward. Said I'd grab tea and journal a bit like the therapist recommended. He smiled and said, "I'm so proud of you. I love that you're doing this for yourself." I smiled back, sick to my stomach. That day, I couldn't see Eli. I was too shaken. I sat in the parking lot behind a real therapist's office and cried. Not because I wanted to stop, but because I realized how far I'd gone. Because even the lie had to be dressed up to look more like healing than destruction. Because I had made therapy, something meant to help, into a smokescreen for betrayal. I told Eli the next day. He offered to pick me up. He just nodded. "It's getting harder, isn't it?" "Yes." "So what now?" "I don't know." We didn't touch that day. We didn't even sit close. I sat across the room from him, staring at a painting on his wall I'd never really noticed. It was abstract, all jagged edges and harsh colors. I said, "Do you think this is going to destroy everything?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "I think it already has." I went home and slept next to my husband like I hadn't just admitted that I was unraveling our life from the inside out. He made love to me that night. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel anything. Not shame, not desire, just numbness. Like I was a body on autopilot. Afterward, he kissed my forehead and said, "You've really changed." Since therapy. And all I could think was, I have. But not for the reasons you think. I should have known it couldn't last forever. The lie was too tight, too neat, and I was getting sloppy. I forgot which stories I'd told him, forgot which cafes I was leaving from. I recycled phrases the therapist had said in that one real session, not noticing that I'd used them more than once. I thought I was careful, but I underestimated him. He didn't say anything that morning, just kissed me on the cheek like always and said, "Good luck today." And I left. I went to Eli's. We made coffee, talked about a book we were both pretending to read. And then we touched. Nothing rushed, nothing desperate. Just hands and skin and breath in that small, too warm apartment. And afterward, I lay in his bed with the window cracked and the sound of birds outside and thought, maybe I could live 2 lives forever if I just stayed quiet enough. Until my phone lit up. A message from my husband. "Where are you right now?" I stared at it too long. The screen dimmed, then lit again. "I'm outside the building. The front desk says you don't have an appointment today." I sat up too fast. Eli said, "What's wrong?" I didn't answer. My hands shook as I typed. "I'm walking around the block." I needed air. He didn't reply. I dressed in silence, pulled my hair back into a ponytail, tried to make my face look less flushed, less guilty. Eli stood in the doorway, watching. "You think he knows?" I nodded. When I got downstairs, he wasn't there. I walked the block 3 times, scanning every parked car. Nothing. I texted him. "Where did you go?" Nothing. I called twice. Voicemail. When I got home, his car was in the driveway. The front door was open. Inside, he was sitting on the couch, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. I walked in slowly, heart pounding. He didn't look at me. "Who is he?" There was no point lying. "His name is Eli." He nodded just once. "How long?" I sat down across from him. "A few months." He looked up, and I've never seen that look on his face. Not even when his father died. Not when we lost our first pregnancy. This was different. This was the look of someone realizing the story of his life had changed, and he hadn't been told. "You said you were getting help." I was. "No, you weren't. You were hiding, you were cheating, you were lying to my face every week." "I know." "I asked if I could drive you," I offered. I didn't want to lie, I just didn't want to stop. Silence. Then he asked, "Did you sleep with him?" I closed my eyes. "Yes." He stood up like the ground had pushed him. "I trusted you," he said, "even when we were distant, even when things got hard. I thought we were trying." "I was trying," I said. "I just didn't know how. You just didn't want to be honest." He walked into the kitchen. I followed, but stayed back. "I don't know what to do now," he said. "Then don't do anything yet." He turned to me. "I'm not making any decisions right now, but I'm done being lied to. If you want to fix this, you'll do it for real." "I will. No more stories. No more coffee shop therapy?" And then he walked past me, up the stairs without touching me, without looking back. That night, I didn't sleep, because I finally knew the lie was over. And whatever came next would be something else entirely. I booked the appointment 2 days later. This time, it was real. Same office as before. Same woman, same waiting room, same bland walls with motivational quotes in black cursive. But this time, I wasn't pretending. I wasn't hiding. I was desperate. I didn't wear makeup. I didn't dress nicely. I didn't rehearse anything in my head. I just sat on the edge of that couch and said, "My husband knows. He found out." She blinked, didn't write anything right away. "And now?" she asked. "I don't know." So I talked. I told her everything. Not just about Eli, about how I'd felt invisible for months, about how I tried to talk to my husband before it all started, but nothing changed, about the guilt, the numbness, the exhaustion of lying, about how easy it had been to convince myself I wasn't really doing anything wrong until it was too late. She listened. When I finished, she asked, "What are you hoping for?" I said, "To feel like a good person again." She didn't smile at that, just said, "That's gonna take work." I came home that day and didn't lie about where I'd been. I told him I'd gone to a real appointment, that I planned to go back. He didn't say anything, just nodded. He was folding laundry. A pile of our son's clothes sat between us like a quiet reminder of what we'd built and what I'd nearly destroyed. That became our rhythm for a while. We didn't talk about Eli. We didn't talk about the affair, but we also didn't pretend it hadn't happened. It just lived in the air around us, heavy and ever-present, like humidity before a storm. We went to couples therapy, too. He didn't want to. Said he didn't see the point. But he showed up. Sat stiffly in the chair, arms crossed, answering questions in clipped sentences. The first few sessions were brutal. We barely looked at each other. But then he asked, "Why him?" And I told the truth. Because he saw me. Because I didn't have to be anything. And because I was angry at you and I didn't want to fix it anymore. It was a terrible thing to say. But it was also the truth. He didn't speak for a long time after that. Then he said, "I would have worked on it, if you'd told me." And I said, "I didn't believe you would." Because at the time, I didn't. At the time, I was already halfway out the door, emotionally. At the time, I didn't think he even noticed I was slipping away. I told the therapist later that I wasn't sure if I wanted to stay. That even now, part of me wanted to leave just so I wouldn't have to live in the same house where I'd lied so thoroughly. But then I'd see my husband brushing our son's hair, or kneeling to tie his shoes, or whispering, "You're my favorite person," as he kissed his forehead goodnight. And I'd break all over again. Because he was a good father, a good man. And I had taken a part of him he didn't even know was vulnerable, his trust, and shattered it. He never yelled at me, never called me names, never told anyone what I'd done. But every time he passed by me in the hallway and didn't reach for my hand, that was the punishment. We slept in the same bed, but it was like sleeping next to a stranger who used to love me. And still, he stayed. At least for now. He never asked if I loved Eli more. Not once. Not when he found out. Not in therapy. Not in the cold months that followed when we tiptoed around each other like strangers trapped in the memory of a marriage. He never asked the question that I asked myself over and over in the dark, the one I was most afraid of answering. I think he was scared of the answer, because even though I didn't love Eli, not the real way, not the way that roots itself in quiet mornings and broken dishwashers and holding your child's hand while they get stitches, I had wanted something from him. I had needed something. And needing someone isn't always about love. Sometimes it's about absence. And Mark knew that. He knew he hadn't been there. He knew the distance between us hadn't been all my doing. But I think that's what made it worse. That even knowing he'd withdrawn, even knowing I felt alone, I still chose betrayal over honesty. He didn't want to know if I'd fallen in love with someone else. He just wanted to believe I hadn't fallen out of love with him. The truth? I hadn't. Not really. I had just forgotten how to be in love with the life we'd built. Forgotten what it meant to fight for something instead of flee from it. Forgotten that comfort isn't the enemy. It's what holds you together when everything else falls apart. But it took burning it all down to understand that. Eli texted me once, about a month after everything came out. Just one message. "You okay?" I didn't answer. I deleted it. I haven't heard from him since. Because whatever I thought we were, whatever hole I thought he filled, it was never real. It was escape. It was self-destruction wrapped in charm. And maybe he cared about me. Maybe he didn't. It doesn't matter now. Because he was never going to be a part of my future. Not the real one. My husband and I are still together. But not the way we were. We still sleep in the same bed. But sometimes I find him already turned away from me. His back like a locked door I don't know how to knock on. Other nights, he pulls me close without saying a word. Those are the nights I cry quietly, buried in his shoulder because I know he's trying. I'm trying too. I go to therapy, real therapy, every week, alone. I talk about the lying, the numbness, the grief, and about how rebuilding isn't a straight line. Some days I feel like we're closer than ever. Others, I feel like we're strangers again. Our son doesn't know what happened. He just knows things are quieter now. That daddy doesn't laugh as much. That mommy goes to real therapy and doesn't smile the way she used to when she comes back. One day, he might ask. And I don't know what I'll say. But for now, we're surviving. Sometimes I wonder if we'll ever be more than that. If love can really return after it's been lied to, broken, humiliated. I don't know. But I know I don't want to lie anymore. I know I want to stay. And I know that every day I wake up and choose my family again. Not because it's easy, but because the alternative is a life built on silence. He never asked if I loved Eli more. And maybe that was his way of protecting me. Or protecting himself. But if he ever did ask, I'd say no. Not for 1 second. Because love and betrayal can exist in the same person. But only one of them survives in the end. And I'm still here, trying to make sure it's the right one.